Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian. I am here today at the Rock Island Auction Company checking out some of the guns, like this one, that they're going to be selling in their upcoming April of 2016 premiere auction. And what I have here today is a Pinfire revolving carbine. I have a hard time turning down different types of revolving carbines when I find them, because they're this interesting little side note of firearms development that it was there for a little while and it kind of petered out. There haven't been very many recently. There have been a few, but not many. Now this one is particularly interesting for three different reasons. First off, it is a 15mm Pinfire gun, which is about as big as they ever made Pinfires. Secondly, it has a folding bayonet on it, which I'll show you in a minute. And thirdly, it was actually sold in Buenos Aires, which is a bit unusual. The Pinfire system was basically developed by Casimir and then his son Eugene Lefaucheux in France and Belgium, and this was a very common type of cartridge and system in European, in Europe between like the 1830s and the 1870s or so. Basically, the Pinfire was one of the first really popular types of metallic self-contained cartridge. And I'll show you around in a minute, but basically you think of a standard metallic case cartridge, except it actually has a pin sticking out the side of the case, and that pin is the firing pin. So the hammer hits that pin, which drives it into the case where it hits a primer and fires the whole thing. That's basically how Pinfire works. There were a lot of small Pinfire revolvers made, and then a much smaller number of Pinfire carbines. Of those, the majority are smaller caliber, 9 or 12mm. The 15mm ones are really pretty rare. That's like 60 caliber. It's a pretty big bullet. Anyway, why don't we take a closer look at this? Let me show you the markings up here that indicate that it went to Buenos Aires, and show you the bayonet. So here we have the main action. You'll notice this has a really big trigger guard. That was typical on revolving rifles because the shooter's support hand cupped around here to avoid getting hit by spatter coming out from the cylinder gap. This also has a pretty darn stiff, heavy double action trigger pull, and so it's actually designed with a 2-finger trigger, like so. So here are markings on the top of the barrel. Juan Lopez, that would be 18 St. Martin Street, Buenos Aires. Now this isn't uncommon. Juan Lopez would not have been the manufacturer. He would have been the reseller, the distributor, the guy running the shop in Buenos Aires where you could actually buy the gun. This would have been made in Belgium. Now we know this would have been made in Belgium because it has this Belgian ELG in an oval proof mark on it. And this was a practice that was quite common at the time, and frankly that was still common in the United States 150 years, well 100 years later. You'll find, for example, bolt-action rifles that have Montgomery Ward or Sears brands on them. Those weren't actually made by those companies. Those were made by other large firearms manufacturers who then sold the guns directly to a retailer like Sears or Montgomery Ward or Juan Lopez in Argentina. And then those resellers would have guns with their own brand names that they could sell. So pretty typical thing. And if you were doing that, often as not, a Belgian Pinfire manufacturer wouldn't really bother putting their own name on the gun. So all you'd end up with is the reseller's name. Now I mentioned I would show you one of the cartridges. This rifle is actually selling with 3 of these cartridges, original cartridges. You can see this is the pin from the term Pinfire. And this goes into the cylinder in such a way that the pin slots into that like that. So now, when you actually go to fire the gun, the hammer hits that pin, drives it down into the case, hits a primer, and detonates the whole thing. So, it's pretty big. 15mm is like 60 caliber. That's a lot of oomph. Pinfire cartridges tend to be a bit slow in velocity just because they are black powder cartridges and generally pretty low velocity, but still that's a big bullet you don't want to get hit with. This action can function as a single action as well as a double action. You can manually cock the hammer like that, and then you have a much nicer trigger pull. Should you run out of gigantic 15mm Pinfire rounds, Mr. Lopez specified that his rifles should helpfully have a folding bayonet on them. Now there's a really heavy spring right here. We have a little catch that locks the tip of the bayonet in place. I'm going to hold it and then let it loose. And then up here at the end, we have a block with a hole in it. Then we have another locking spring here on the bottom of the bayonet. That snaps into place. And in order to take it out, you push down on this button. And you can then lift the bayonet out. With that bayonet on, you've got kind of a nasty weapon there. That's a triangular, pointy bayonet. There's a close-up of our locking mechanism. That spring just pulls down to release. The sights on this guy are actually a lot better than you'd expect for most guns of this age. This isn't a dated rifle, but the heyday of the Pinfire revolving carbine was really like 1855 to 1875, so kind of at the latter half of the Pinfire era in general. This has this nice receiver-mounted aperture sight that combines with this perfectly adequate rounded ball of a front sight, and you can actually get a remarkably good sight picture. Most guns of this period had sights that consisted of a post kind of like that, but then coupled with a really small V-notch that's fairly difficult to use effectively. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Definitely not a common sort of gun to see, and I like compiling an extensive video library of revolving carbines for people to watch, and this is a cool extra one to add to that list. If you'd like to own it yourself, take a look at the description text below. You'll find a link to Rock Island's catalog page on this piece. You can check out their pictures and description and everything they've got on the gun. And if you'd like it, you can place a bid right there online. Thanks for watching. And by the way, if you ever find bayonets on rifles, before you just pop them out, make sure to check if they're spring-loaded or not, because this one's got a really powerful spring on it, and if you weren't careful, you could take your face off with that thing accidentally.